Welcome to the 14th Annual International Education Summit and happy International Education Week. My name is Michelle Harpenow and I'm the Executive Director with the World Affairs Council. Welcome to How a Kid from Dayton Helped the Yugoslav Wars, Economic Sanctions, and the Dayton Accords with Rich Lauf and Todd Schwartz. For those of you who don't know the World Affairs Council, I'm going to share with you briefly about our work. So the World Affairs Council has been around since 1923. We have about 90 chapters across the United States. The World Affairs Council's main mission is about increasing international awareness and cultural understanding for our community. And we focus on that in three ways. First, we want to serve our students. And students for us are ages 3 all the way to adults. We believe that you should be a continuous learner. We have programs that reach about 7,000 kids in the area. And we're really grateful that we're able to bring this into a virtual manner today. In addition, we also work directly with the U.S. Department of State's International Visitor Leadership Program. So we're able to have that people-to-people diplomacy effort and able to reach people here locally, meeting with people globally, so that we can drive economically world economics and be able to help meet that diplomacy effort, which is really important between the United States and countries all over the world. We are now doing that virtually as well. In addition, we love putting on these webinars for you and being able to connect with our community in this way. We're really trying to focus on hot foreign affairs topics that are going on in this region, but of course also around the world. So again, this year we're hosting for the first time our virtual International Education Summit. Thanks to our regional World Affairs Councils in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, we have planned not 1 day, but 5 days of events on the theme of peace and justice. Not only will we be reaching more students throughout the region, but the world. And we have opened the events up to include teacher workshops, as well as the community-wide events for all to enjoy. Now I would just like to take a brief minute to thank all of the people and our sponsors who make this week possible. First, I would like to thank our title sponsor, Northern Kentucky University. Thank you to also our supporting sponsors, the Brueggemann Center at Xavier University, Foreign Policy Leadership Council, Miami University Global Initiatives, and the University of Cincinnati. I also would like to thank our annual supporters who support education programs throughout the entire year. Thank you to our partner organizations, the Columbus Council on World Affairs, Cleveland Council on World Affairs, Indiana Council on World Affairs, World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana, World Affairs Council of Northwest Ohio, Bespoken Live on Campus, European American Chamber of Commerce. So thank you so much for being a part of this. As you notice, those are some of our chapter organizations within the region. So, if you are living in one of those cities, please do reach out. There's a lot of good work going on. Thank you also to our marketing partners, our World Affairs Council's Global Education Advisory Council, and Ohio Council for Social Studies. A special thank you to Deborah Schultz, our advisory member of the World Affairs Council, who helped build this impressive week of global conversations, with our very own Hannah Girth, our global education manager. So we have a short video for you to kick us off and get us thinking about peace and justice this week.
Hi, my name is Sipa Lanka and I'm a student at the University of Central Florida. To me, peace is the absence of agitation or disruption. And justice is the act of holding someone accountable for their actions, decisions, or views.
I'm Piper Harrell, and I'm a freshman at Ohio State. To me, peace is the absence of violence, and justice is when systems and people that inflict violence are held accountable for their actions. Justice must exist for true peace to exist.
Hello, everyone. My name is Prerna Gandhi, and I'm a Global Guide volunteer at World Affairs Council. To me, peace and justice is letting go of the idea of trying to make or have this a perfect world which doesn't exist. First, we need to find peace in our own mind. As a good civic leaders, we need to always be ready to question our biases and have respect and willing to understand each other's perspectives, and then only we can move forward as a society.
Now I would like to introduce you to Mindy Yu, Associate Director of International Recruitment at Miami University. She is representing one of our supporting sponsors for this week's events. Mindy is the Associate Director for International Enrollment at Miami University. Growing up in Lorain, Ohio, she came to understand the importance of advocating for the needs of an international audience when she volunteered to be an English conversation partner to international students during her undergraduate years at The Ohio State University. While at The Ohio State University, she double majored in animal sciences and Korean, proof that you can still have a global career with an animal sciences degree. I love that. The experience working with international students and seeing the challenges that they faced led her to pursue a master's in higher education administration at the University of Dayton to advocate and work with international students in the college setting. Currently, in her role working in international admissions, she hopes to continue to promote international education, not only at Miami University, but in the Midwest state of Ohio. Thank you so much for being with us, Mindy.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Michelle. Hello, everyone from Oxford, Ohio on this beautiful Monday. Oxford is the home to Miami University, not University of Miami, which many folks get confused about when they first hear our name. When I travel to different countries on behalf of Miami to speak to high school students about studying in the US, that is actually the most common first question is, why are we named Miami University? We are actually named after the Native Americans from Oxford, the Miami Indians. So as tribute to them after they left, we named the university Miami University in their honor. In fact, we were established as a university way before Florida became a state. So we are a mid-sized university with a strong focus on the liberal arts education. And for those of you who are interested in Division I sports, our most popular program is not football, but actually hockey. So if you are ever on campus, I would highly recommend for you to see at least one hockey game because they're really fun. And we also have a lot of fun traditions on the Oxford campus. So for example, one fun tradition that we have is that we coined the term Miami mergers. And you're probably sitting there wondering, what is a Miami merger? That is actually when two graduates from Miami University get married to each other, and hence they become a Miami merger. We actually have a building on campus. It's called Upham Hall. That is actually where we house our College of Arts and Science. And legend goes that if you were to kiss your sweetheart under the arch, then you will become soulmates. So in fact, we actually have Miami mergers from 17 different countries. I actually just celebrated my 9th year at Miami University, and it has certainly been a pleasure working for this institution. I always told myself that I wanted to work for an institution whose values that I believed in. And one of the main reasons that I'm still with Miami is because of their goal to promote international education. Miami actually wants their graduates to be successful global citizens. And we attract students not only from all 50 states in the US, but we also have 91 different countries represented on our campus. We do have a student population of about 19,000 students, but a majority of our students are actually undergraduate students. And one thing I usually tell students when they are considering Miami University is that they have the potential to either room with someone from Brazil or someone from Oklahoma. And also study abroad is a huge component of our education at Miami University. Students get to choose from 90 plus study abroad locations regardless of their major. And we also have a campus in Luxembourg. And one of the advantages of that is that not only can you take classes in a 16th century castle, which is pretty cool. You could actually go backpacking during the weekends if you have time. And because it is a part of Miami, those credits transfer directly back into the main campus. Switching gears, According to a 2019 Open Doors report, Ohio actually ranks 8th in terms of our top 10 states that send the most international students to the US. With high ranking institutions and affordable cost of living, we are home to nearly 35,000 international students. And those students bring not only their academic talent, but also new perspectives and financial contributions to the local economy. They are an asset regardless of which campus environment they are on. And also, in terms of Miami University's goals to our international efforts, in 2019, we were awarded the Senator Paul Simon Award for Internationalization on Campus. We were actually one of 5 campuses that was given that award. And I would actually like to highlight a couple strengths that we have at Miami University. First of all, we require our students to take the Global Miami Plan. So regardless of what major you are in, you are required to take courses that will develop your international perspective. And regardless if you study abroad or not, this will really give you a broader sense in terms of what you could contribute globally. And this is also one of the reasons that employers keep coming back to Miami University, is because they really value students who have that global touch. They want those students who are familiar with working with different cultures. And Miami students are really excel in terms of the soft skills, knowing how to communicate effectively, working in teams, and really solving issues of today's world. And as I mentioned before, we also have the Luxembourg program, which is a program that goes back 50 years. And we also have strong partnerships with different entities throughout the world. So their job is to really bring in students from different countries so that they could spend one summer not only in Oxford, Ohio, but also learn what it's like to be on a US university campus. And Miami University is unique, not only because we have students in the from US institutions or US high schools, but we also are strong because we have faculty members that are internationally known. We have international students on our campus. So with this, we really create a strong foundation of internationalization, not only in Oxford or in Southwest Ohio, but also throughout the US and internationally. And with that, I want to thank you for your time, and I will hand it back to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Mindy. And thank you again to Miami University for being one of our supporting sponsors. We're very excited about that. And all of our sponsorships actually help make this event free for everyone. So thank you again for doing that. And now I do want to take a moment to get our program started. So our program is, again, How a Kid from Dayton Helped the Yugoslav Wars, Economic Sanctions, and the Dayton Accords with Rich Lauf and Todd Schwartz. So to kick us off, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Rich Lauf. So Rich actually started with the World Affairs Council and being involved at age 14 in Chicago. And you'll have to ask him later about the story, but can you believe it? You know, you're sitting there and you're in high school and you're getting ready to, explore the world and think about what's going on, and you're 14. So I really do hope that a lot of you out there are encouraged that, if you start today, you will stay involved, in your future career. So Rich actually was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. He was was an Army platoon officer in Vietnam. And when he returned to the States, he started his career with Procter & Gamble. So he's been all over the world with Procter & Gamble and all that goes on there. But he actually joined us here at the World Affairs Council many years back, and it's been such a pleasure to work with Rich as a board member of the World Affairs Council. So he's going to go ahead and get us kicked off talking about how a kid from Dayton helped. So Rich, I'll go ahead and pass it to you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. You're going to be hearing for the next 40 minutes or so, really about a case study in peace and justice. You heard the inspiring comments of people at the beginning video, but peace and justice does not just happen. It takes real work, real skill, real diplomacy to bring that about. So what we're going to talk about today, the Yugoslav wars, the Dayton Accords, and the work that in particular, one State Department official that I will introduce helped bring about both peace and justice, but it's work. So before we start to hear his personal experiences, I thought it might be useful for me to just go through very quickly a little history. And I want to say the history of the part of the world that is the Balkans, Yugoslavia, is a very complex, very confused in some ways history going back hundreds of years. So I'm going to give you a short introduction to set the stage for the specific work that Todd's going to talk to us about. So the history starts, or at least I'm going to pick up our history, in 1918. Following World War I, the country of Yugoslavia was cobbled together from a number of ethnic enclaves in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which of course at the end of World War II had fallen apart. So these were very different ethnic groups, different languages, different cultures, different religions. And as a result, excuse me, Yugoslavia never really came together as a country, as we would think of a unified country. It was weak and confused in its own internals. It was occupied by the Nazis in World War II, and it had partisans fighting the Nazis. And following World War II, one of those partisan leaders became the leader of Yugoslavia. He was a communist partisan, Marshal Tito, and he took over and largely held the country together by force. He tamped down the underlying ethnic disputes with an iron hand. I also should point out, though, that while he said he was a communist and ran a communist government, compared to many of the other states of Eastern Europe, he did take his own independent views of the world and was not quite the puppet of the Soviet diplomacy or interest that many of the other countries in Eastern Europe were. So Yugoslavia was a little bit out of that orbit, but still run with an iron hand. At the end of the Cold War and the breakup of the Soviet Union, ethnic frictions that had been bubbling in Yugoslavia for decades developed into open hostilities as various sections and factions, largely ethnic, began to declare some form of independence from the central government in Yugoslavia, eventually saying, yes, we are our own country and we're now no longer part of that central organization. Yugoslavia broke up into pieces. Now that presents a couple problems. Number one, these new statelets argued over where do you draw the boundaries? Because let's face it, there was a mixing of these ethnic groups in various parts. So each country, statelet, ethnic group would look and say, throughout history, they'd go back to the 1500s and say, well, this particular year, this was our territory. And one next door would say, well, yeah, but in 1627, this was our territory. And everybody picked the year that, of course, when their particular part was the biggest, which meant that a lot of the land was claimed 2 or 3 times by these various countries, each pointing to a time on a map when they controlled the most land. So borders became a source of dispute. And secondly, the treatment of my ethnic kinsmen, so to speak, in the other country became an issue. So I say my ethnic group is being badly treated by your country, by your organizations. And I have a right to say something about how my ethnic people are being treated in your country. This is not a prescription for either peace or justice. This is a prescription for conflict, hostility, and abuses. It got to the point where genocidal acts were being created, mass murders, mass rapes, ethnic cleansing, where they're just taking anybody that's not part of my ethnic group and kicking them out of the country. And the Western European powers in the US realized that this was a humanitarian crisis of major proportions and intervened, and NATO intervened. And eventually international diplomacy led to the Dayton Accords. They're called the Dayton Accords because they were negotiated and signed right up at Wright Air Force Base in Dayton. The peace agreement settled things down, although NATO troops remained in the area to keep the peace. So getting to peace was a major undertaking of negotiation of all the parties, ending in the Dayton Accords. Now, I want to turn my attention a little bit to the humanitarian crises of the conflict. In particular, of the 5 or 6 small states, Serbia and Montenegro were very bad actors, both committing widespread and serious violations of human rights. In fact, later on, and this comes back to our theme of justice, a number of their leaders and paramilitary leaders were actually convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity by an international tribunal. So once peace occurred, there was in fact at least some justice brought at the end of this conflict. So the US and other allies, though, wanted to deal with these humanitarian crises and abuses of people in the region. Well, to do that, you have to strangle the military forces and paramilitary forces that are committing these crimes. Well, how do you do such a thing? You have to cut off their resources. You have to cut off their fuel. You have to cut off their ammunition. You have to cut off the financial resources they're using to pay their troops and carry out their operations. So many governments in the West and NATO imposed sanctions, saying we will cut off these resources to the parties, both physical flows and financial flows. Here's the problem. It's easy to declare sanctions, but it can be very difficult to enforce them. So you could say, you don't get any fuel for your military. How do you keep fuel from flowing in trade and business and smuggling and so on? How do you cut off money? So our next speaker was directly involved in the US efforts to bring about peace and justice through sanctions that were effective and began to reduce the ability of the players to create these human rights violations. Let me tell you just a little bit about Todd Schwartz. I was delighted when he agreed to speak. He had a very distinguished career as a Foreign Service officer in the US State Department. And as Michelle pointed out, he now serves our region as the director for the European American Chamber of Commerce, helping to create links, business links and trade. Todd graduated from Miami University. He became a Foreign Service officer in 1987. And in the Q&A, some of you may be interested in what does it mean to be a Foreign Service officer? How does one get to be one? And what do they do for a living? He's going to tell you some of what they do for a living. But I will point out that in the course of his work for the US State Department, he had overseas posts in Germany, Saudi Arabia, Tunisia, Qatar, Kuwait, and several other countries, as I recall. And he once told me the story of learning Arabic so that he could operate effectively in the Middle East. You might want to ask about that too. His Washington duties, when he wasn't overseas working on behalf of our government, he was the director of the Office of Iraqi Economic Affairs, and he was the director of the Office of Iran Affairs. So you can see that the State Department entrusted him with some very serious responsibilities on key international issues. He retired from the State Department with the rank of consular. Just to give you a point of comparison, that's the equivalent of a brigadier general, basically. Todd's a real expert. I read a lot about international affairs, and sometimes my head explodes and I'm puzzled and say, what is really going on here? I'll pick up the phone and give Todd a call, and I always get valuable perspective from him. And I'll turn it over now to Todd, and I'm sure you will find you get valuable perspective from Todd.
Hey, Rich, thanks so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. I'm really proud to be associated with the World Affairs Council, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you guys today. So let me just say a little bit about the European American Chamber. As Rich says, I'm the executive director of that organization. It's about 15 years old, and you know, we help to promote business ties and trade ties between the Cincinnati region and Europe. You probably don't know, but there's well over 250 actually European companies that operate in and around the Cincinnati region. That's a lot of jobs, and I'm proud to be able to help support those companies. But I'm not here to talk about this. I'm talk about that. I'm here to tell you the story about how I had an opportunity to make a positive difference, and how I got there and how I did that. And you know, again, this isn't a deep dive into foreign policy, but it's just a story about how somebody with a background really not that different from yours, just a kid from Dayton, you know, how you can actually do something really important. And just a couple things that Rich didn't talk about. I mean, when I say I'm a kid from Dayton, I mean, I was born in Indiana. Born in Jeffersonville, Indiana, just across the river from Louisville. Moved to Dayton when I was 9 years old. Actually lived in the Centerville neighborhood in Dayton. Went to Normandy Elementary, went to Watts Middle School, graduated from Centerville High School in 1982. Go Elks. And as Rich said, I was very proud and very honored to be able to be accepted at Miami University. Enrolled there in the fall of 1982 and studied business. And also, as Mindy pointed out, Miami has some wonderful international programs, and I was very, very happy to participate in the Miami University Luxembourg program. I was there the entire school year from 1984 to 1985. I am also a Miami merger. My wife graduated from Miami. Two of my children graduated from Miami University as well. So I'm a big fan of Miami, and very happy to consider myself a Red Hawk alumni. That Luxembourg program was wonderful. It gave me the opportunity to travel around Europe to see different perspective. I mean, just an ad for the World Affairs Council. That's the whole purpose of this program, is to give you the opportunity to have international experiences and to gain different perspectives. And again, salute the World Affairs Council for its work in that area, and encourage you as students to try to get that as best you can. Anyway, back to my story. Came back from from Luxembourg, was finishing my degree in business economics. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, like many college students. When I graduated, I said, well, you know, undergraduate degree in business economics, what do you do with that? I said, I'll go to graduate school. Maybe I'll go to law school. But instead, I took a test called the Foreign Service Officer Test. It's a written examination. It's the first step in the process of becoming a Foreign Service Officer. And if you ever think about doing something like that, you can go to a website called careers.state.gov. It talks about careers with the State Department. But just a little bit of overview. What does a diplomat do? What does it mean to be a member of the Foreign Service? Diplomats are not, as some people say, striped pants cookie pushers who go to cocktail parties all the time. Some diplomats do that. Other diplomats help American citizens who run into trouble overseas, that lose their passports or get arrested, or get stranded because of a pandemic and have no way to get home. Other members of our diplomatic corps are responsible for keeping the embassy safe. Others make sure that that we have paper for the printers and that the computers work. And then other diplomats do the kind of work that I did. My primary responsibility in my career was helping U.S. companies who are doing business overseas to make sure that we trade goods on terms that are fair to everybody. Most diplomats work for the U.S. Department of State. Some work for the Department of Agriculture. Some work for the Department of Commerce. And most diplomatic careers involve extended periods of time overseas. But as Rich pointed out, there's also opportunities in Washington. My first 2 jobs with the State Department were overseas. My first two assignments. My first assignment was in Frankfurt, Germany. That's Frankfurt, West Germany. So very long time ago, back when it was still West Germany. I moved there with my wife. My first son was actually born in West Germany. We lived in an apartment that the consulate, which was a branch office at the embassy, had provided for us. And my primary job there was helping American citizens who needed passports and to give visas or permission for non-Americans to come and visit the United States. After Frankfurt, we went to Saudi Arabia, where we lived in the Haran, Saudi Arabia, which is the headquarters of the world's largest oil company, Saudi Aramco. And while I was there, I learned a lot about how oil gets bought and sold and refined and transported. And that's going to become important to this story just a little bit later. Now, if you know, I was in Saudi Arabia. Actually, we got there in 1989. I left Saudi Arabia in 1991. Some of you that know a little bit about the history of the region may remember in August of 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. I was there through that whole environment. And so I also, while I was in Saudi Arabia, got this handy dandy gas mask to protect me from chemical gas attacks that Saddam Hussein was launching against U.S. forces and international forces. Not really a part of the story, but all the life of a diplomat isn't just happy and glamour. Anyway, finished that assignment. In 1992, I moved back to Washington. I got a job in something called the Office of Global Energy at the State Department in Washington, D.C. My job was to keep an eye on global oil markets, and in particular, the countries of the Middle East. And at that time, and still today, oil from that region is very important to the world economy. And so anything that would impact the flow of oil from that region, from natural disasters to political unrest to Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, that was something that America's political leaders needed to know about, anticipate, and hopefully try to keep from participating or keep from happening. So that leads us back to Serbia and Montenegro. So I'm in this job. I've started this job. Now, back as early as 1991, as Rich was saying, the European Union had already started to impose economic sanctions on Serbia and Montenegro because of this growing unrest. And as he said, sanctions are really just a fancy way of trying to restrict trade to encourage a company to change its policy direction. In 1992 and 1993, the UN Security Council, so at a global level, the UN, is passing a number of resolutions imposing additional economic sanctions, including bans on all international trade, scientific and technical cooperation, sports and cultural exchanges, and travel of government officials from the former Republic of Yugoslavia. There was a resolution passed in November of 1992 that banned all inward and outward maritime shipping. So another set of sanctions. Just to be clear, I mean, again, as Rich said, the intent of the sanctions is not just to strangle the economy. I mean, obviously a ban like this would not only stop weapons and ammunition and fuel and all the other things that you need to fight a war from getting into the country, but the ultimate goal is to demonstrate that the policy that the country is following just is untenable. It won't stand. We're not going to support any a policy of ethnic cleansing, and that the government, the intent is to drive the government to a negotiating table so that it can find a way to live peacefully and in justice with its neighbors. Now, if you look at a map of the region, which I think Hannah's going to put up, as Rich said, it's one thing to pass a resolution like this, but it's a very different thing to enforce it. If you look at the red line on that map, you'll see that's the Danube River. The Danube River there starts up in Germany, just north of Switzerland, flows through Germany, through Austria, Hungary, Yugoslavia at the time, now Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and then empties into the Black Sea. The river there is a very important international waterway. And, so trade moves from Germany through Austria, Hungary, and in both directions from the Black Sea up into Central Europe and vice versa. And as you see, that river runs right through Serbia and smack through the center of Belgrade. So how do you stop illicit trade that might be moving, fuel or weapons or other things into Serbia and not strangle the economy of Hungary or Austria or Germany and all the goods and products that might be flowing up and down the Danube to some of those other 10 countries or other 9 countries that lie along the river? How do you enforce these kind of sanctions without strangling those countries? Well, that was the question. In 1993, on February 12th, the Secretary of State established a U.S. interagency task force on Serbia-Montenegro sanctions to answer that question. What's a task force? A task force is just a way to get all of the different elements of the United States government into one room to address a crisis. Could be a pandemic, could be a plane crash, could be all different kinds of things. So in our case, the task force brought together a couple different key elements. It brought together the intelligence community. These were the people who could help us identify efforts by foreign governments and foreign companies to evade sanctions, and sometimes U.S. companies. The task force brought together law enforcement because in most countries, evading sanctions is something that's against the law. The task force brought together the U.S. military because they could communicate with other militaries as well as employ their own assets if for some reason we needed to move against a target to stop illicit trade. The task force brought together the Treasury Department because all of this, as Rich has said, is fueled by money that moves around the world, moving between banks. And so the Treasury Department can help with that. And of course, then they had the State Department. Our role was really to coordinate everything in Washington. And most importantly, we had the assets on the ground in the embassies and consulates that we had across Europe and around the world. The ones that could provide us with accurate information and also that could undertake our instructions to work with local governments to enforce sanctions. How did I get on the task force? Well, I was asked specifically, again, because of my knowledge of global energy markets. We had a really good sense of what kind of fuel the Serbians and the Montenegrins needed for their power plants. And we knew how they normally would get it. As their regular sources for oil, for coal, for natural gas dried up, our job was to figure out what was the Serbian government doing to try and replace that fuel, and how do we stop it? Ultimately, again, this sounds really complicated and interesting, and at the heart of it, though, it's really, really simple. And I'm just going to provide an example, and I'm just making this up. I'm not giving away any secrets. Let's just say our intelligence agencies discovered that the Serbians had signed a contract for the delivery of oil from a refinery in Vienna or in Austria. So the company selling the oil, so it's an Austrian refinery, but let's say the company that's contracting for the sale is based in Thailand. The barge that's going to transport the oil is owned by a Dutch company, but it sails under a Greek flag. And then let's say the whole transaction is being financed by a bank based in London. So the task force gets this information, does a little bit of research, nails down this information, and we spring into action. As soon as we've got that, we've started to write telegrams, write messages to our embassies, and our embassies in Vienna and in Thailand and in the Netherlands and in Greece and in London, they are all on their phones with, or they are in the offices of their counterparts, the appropriate counterparts in those countries. They're sharing the information that the task force has developed. They are explaining how that transaction is subverting the intent of these international sanctions, and they are demanding the governments, in line with the demands of the Security Council, they're demanding them to take actions. So we'll tell the Austrians they need to prevent the barge from being loaded with oil. If the barge has already left the refinery, we'll tell them to stop it before it leaves Austrian waters. If it's left Austrian waters, we'll tell the Hungarian government to stop it before it gets to Serbian waters. In Thailand, the embassy will tell the government that they need to prosecute the company that is illegally selling oil to Serbia in violation of UN sanctions. We'll tell the Dutch government that they need to take actions against the owners of that barge. We'll tell the Greek government that they need to deflag that vessel, which means taking, basically removing the licensing, the national licensing of that vessel, so that it can't attain insurance. And no captain's going to sail unless his ship has got insurance. In London, we'll be asking the government to freeze the bank accounts of everybody involved in this transaction. Now, any one of these actions should be sufficient to stop the transaction. Doing them all simultaneously, most importantly, sends the signal to the Serbian government, as well as to all of the other governments involved in this effort, that we're serious and that these sanctions are going to bite. And that was my job. I spent about 3 months on this task force, reviewing, analyzing information that we would receive to identify the suspicious transactions, and we would prepare the instructions to the embassies, telling them to stop them. We would analyze where we might be missing things. You know, what were the holes that the Serbians were finding or that we hadn't yet found, so that, you know, we could take action there and say, well, we need to look at this or we need to look at that. And most importantly, we also kept a very comprehensive record of everything that we were doing, all the different activities, because of course we had to report to Congress. We had to report to our leadership on what was going on. Sometimes we would have to elevate issues. You know, if the embassy couldn't get action, you know, we might have to convoke an ambassador, a foreign ambassador, in to meet somebody at the State Department or even to the White House to receive instructions. And of course, we also had to keep good records so we could report to Congress. And most importantly, or well, not most importantly, but also, you know, it's important to have a good historical record of some of these things, so that we know for later analysis and for historical purposes. So that was my job. And that's what I did for, like I say, about 3 months. And I was very proud to do that work because I knew that it was both reinforcing the integrity of the United Nations process, and I knew that it would help to end the humanitarian disaster that Rich was describing. So a few months after I left the task force, I got word that I was to receive an award for my work. And we had a very nice ceremony, and I and several of my colleagues were recognized for what I'd done. And I got this very nice Meritorious Honor Award. It actually came in a frame. I took it out of a frame because when you do this job for as long as I do, you move a lot. And I had lots of frame pictures. And Hannah's going to put up a picture so you can see that. And I know you can't read the language on their certificate, but if Hannah will put that up, I'll read it to you so you can see what it says. It says, a Meritorious Honor Award, Todd Schwartz, in recognition of superb performance in support of U.S. policy initiatives regarding the former Yugoslavia and the UN sanctions against Serbia and Montenegro. His energetic efforts in international coordination of sanctions enforcement have been a major factor in achieving our UN sanctions goals. And it's signed by the Undersecretary for Political Affairs, Peter Tarnoff, which of course none of you know who that is, but I do, and I'm pretty cool. So that's what the certificate said. And Hannah, if you'll put me back up, you'll see, in addition to that, I got these handy dandy awards, medals, and it says right on there, Meritorious Honor Award. And just like a military officer, you know, we get medals too. So now, just to finish up, now that was just my third assignment with the Foreign Service. I was 6 years into my career when I got that. As you heard Rich say, I spent 28 years with the State Department in fun places like Kuwait and Iraq and the Philippines, and got a number of other different awards and certificates during my career. That's the story for another day. That's the story I wanted to tell you today. Just to conclude, again, you know, just a kid from Dayton who graduated from a state school in Ohio that shared a name with a university in Florida that isn't even based in the city that it says it's named after. University of Miami's in Coral Gables. So there you go. That's my story. And, you know, I'm hoping you got some questions and some interest. But if nothing else, I hope you find it useful to learn kind of what careers in the State Department are like. And again, if you want to learn more, careers.state.gov. It's not for everybody, but it was the best job I ever had.